The title of my story is "The Meal Seals the Deal." Whenever we share over a table food with someone, it's important to nourish ourselves and the relationship that's in front of us too. When I was a student in Italy, I'd often go to the library. And one day I went in and I said to the librarian, "I need a favor as a friend." And he looked at me and said, "Are we friends?" And I said, "Yeah, I come in here almost every day and we talk about books and we talk about Italy. We root for the same soccer team, Tifosi di Roma." It's like, "Do we ever eat together?" Well, no, you're right. We never eat together. His definition of what his friends, his circle of friends was really clear to me. I wasn't in it. And therefore, if you share a meal with somebody, it's kind of important. Some of my first family meals really sit with me all my life. There was a time I was too young to know why we were going on vacation. Dad said we were going to take some days off school. We all got in the car, drove to Grandma's house. All my aunts and uncles were there. My dad and his brothers have a strange habit. They're four bald men. They sit around the dining room table and they take off their glasses and they grab sections of the newspaper and they read the newspaper with their glasses off and they keep trading all the way around the table all morning. I was in the kitchen and I put my glasses on. And I was in the kitchen and Grandma came in. Grandma was old at the time. She said, "Would you go in the freezer and give me a piece of lemon cake for lunch?" And I said, "Well, no, you can't have lemon cake for lunch. I think that's a rule." And she's like, no, in the freezer, there's a little box with lemon cake in it. Would you get that out?" I'm like, I don't think so. I think we'd better get some roast beef, or I know there's other things in the fridge that we could eat, but you can't have cake for lunch. I'm sure that's a rule. I heard Uncle Ernie come from the other room. "Jeff, if Grandma wants lemon cake for lunch, Grandma gets lemon cake for lunch." Who knew? Like, well, how old do you have to be to eat cake for lunch? 30, 50, 70? Well, when do you get to eat lemon cake for lunch? One of my earliest memories I also share with that grandma. Before she got really old, I remember she lived in a farmhouse. My dad, his brothers, grandma lived on a farm. And there was a time, I've seen the picture. The picture's not the part that I remember. The picture maybe jogs some things, but it's a picture of the four bald men and me, and we're going out hunting. And there must be a lot I don't remember about this day. Like, there must have been some loud noises. There must have been some gross parts of the day that I totally don't remember. But lunch that day in the dining room of the farmhouse was fried rabbit and coleslaw. And it was one of the best meals I've ever had. I've always sought out that fried rabbit meal again. And whenever I saw Grandma through the healthy years, I begged her to make coleslaw. Her coleslaw was really good. My grandparents on the other side of the family were from Italy. I'd go over to Grandpa's house, and they'd say, "What do you want to eat?" And I'm like, "I just had lunch. I'm really not hungry at all." And they're like, "Well, no. If you're going to come over and we're going to share space, you have to eat something." I don't know. Like, you want a sandwich? No, I just had lunch. What about some ice cream? There's always room for ice cream. Okay, I'll take a little bowl of ice cream. And then I'd go help Grandpa in the yard. Grandpa always put on a tie. I never figured this out. I only knew Grandpa during the retirement years. And when Grandpa worked at Ford, he probably didn't have to wear a tie anyway, but he felt like every day was a little bit formal. And we'd go work in the garden with his tie on. He only had two plants, or he had two types of plants. He had many plants, and he had two types. Half the garden was tomatoes, half the garden was yellow spicy peppers. He's from Calabria. And one day we worked in the garden. He's like, "It's time for lunch. It's ready. I can smell it." This was Detroit in the summer. It was hot. It was hot. It was probably in the 90s. The kitchen was hot. He'd been stewing this pot of tomatoes and peppers, you know, the two plants that he has. I don't know if he'd been stewing it for like the day, the week, or possibly his whole life. And it was always there in the summer, and I knew it. So we sat down at the table, and he gave me this bowl, and I was ready for this bowl. I'm like, "Yeah, sit down with Grandpa. I don't get to do this very often." I tasted this. It was so hot. It was screaming hot. It was screaming hot. I started sweating right away. I think I started crying right away. I'm like, "Grandpa, I don't think I can eat this." He's like, "Of course you can eat it. This is good. This is like our family food." He's like, "Oh man, this is the family food. I better eat it." He's like, ripped off a piece of bread, handed me this piece of bread, and he's like, "Eat the bread. It takes the spice off the tongue." I'm like, And he hands me this tiny piece of bread. All right, I can do this. Man, I got through that bowl with Grandpa. Grandpa and I in the kitchen, it was hot. By the time I got to that end of that bowl, I was covered in sweat, I was crying, my nose was bleeding. I got through that bowl. I ate it all with Grandpa, and I was like, yeah, I was in the family meal today. This was awesome. It can't be a coincidence that two of what I really consider my earliest memories, I don't know, there might be some other sideline ones in there, two of my earliest memories are associated with the family and food. And that's how important food is. And then there's meals I often have with my son. This summer we toured Italy, went all around. My son loves mozzarella cheese. He goes to every restaurant and gets a caprese salad. And we'll sit there and we will take that caprese salad apart. We'll taste it and he's like, this one's a little dry, this one's a little moist, this one needs more olive oil, this one needs more pepper, this one the basil's a little wilty. And we went everywhere. He's a hard to please dude. He loves it. He's like, this is the best, but it's not the perfect one. We go to Paestum, the home of mozzarella. He's like, I don't like this one so much. I don't like the olive oil in it. Okay. Finally, we end up in this Rome basement. It's a restaurant with salmon-colored tablecloths. He sits back and says, this is the best one. This is it. This is the perfect one. It took us weeks, but all those meals, we built our relationship. We nourished ourselves. It was like the warmest thing that we could do with each other. The nourishment was there. It was evident all the time. Now what we do, often on Sunday, he'll say, please, let's make ragu today. Let's make ragu. I'm like, okay, let's do it. We'll get out a pot. Not quite as big as Grandpa's, but pretty big. And we'll throw bones in it and sausage in it. Lots of tomatoes. We'll make the ragu. We'll let it sit all day. And at night, we'll sit down with some fresh pasta, and he'll say, it's better than a restaurant, Dad. It's better than restaurants in Italy. And that's when we nourish ourselves. He nourishes me with those words, even if I nourish him with the food. Then there's a colleague. I lead trips through Italy in the summers. So as a colleague, we have probably shared some of the best meals in the world. We've shared like roasted wild boar in Tuscany. We've had artichokes in Rome in May. It's the perfect thing, it really is. We had a fish in Sorrento. We go to this restaurant. Nello's the waiter. We go to Nello, and we say, we want that red fish on the big ice table, the big table. I want that one right there. He's like, you want that fish? Like, we want that fish right there. It's called scarfone, isn't it? Is that a scarfone? He's like, yeah, that's the scarfone. I'm like, okay, let's do it. He's like, are you sure you want that fish? I'm like, definitely. I want that fish. I know it's going to be good. We'd sit down for this meal. It'd be a meal with mussels. We'd have a bowl of mussels first, and they'd be so good. They'd taste a little salty because they're fresh from the sea. And you'd name each one and appreciate it, and you'd say, oh, Francesco, thank you. Pietro, you were a good mussel. And there must have been other parts of this meal. I know there were some white beans on the side. I know there was probably some sauteed spinach. And then Niello brings out this fish, and he cuts it in half and debones it with a spoon. It was the perfect fish. Every bite was so moist and so good. Niello comes back when we're done, and he says, is that fish okay? I'm like, yeah, that fish was like perfect. This was like the best meal ever. Like, Niello, what's wrong with the fish? Like, why do you keep asking us this? He's like, that fish, usually it serves 8. We had no trouble getting through that fish. That meal was really good. Then there are, of course, the small meals I've shared with my beautiful wife. In Venice, we'd leave the hotel in the morning, and we'd get this cornetto, and it was still warm with almond paste, and we'd eat it, and we'd say how good it was, and we'd see each other smile about it. It was good. And then at night, we'd come back to the hotel, and we'd stop in the same place and have a glass of Prosecco, and it was really good. It was sweet and bubbly, and we smiled at each other, just like dinner tonight. And these are parts that really nourish the body and the relationship you're in. There was a time I knew I was old enough to know why I was going on vacation. I went right from the airport to the hospital. My dad was dying. I walked into the room, there were the 4 bald men. The doctor was there too. My dad said, I really want to die at home. The doctor said, impossible. You can't die at home. You're too weak, you can't leave. My dad said, I'd really like to get rid of the feeding tube and eat some fried chicken. Impossible, you're too weak for that. You eat the chicken, you're not strong enough to swallow, you could choke, you could aspirate it, there's infections, you can't eat fried chicken. No way. Doctor left after a while. He was not a very sunshiny man. And my dad said after a while, I'm really serious. I think I just want to eat some fried chicken. Uncle Ernie said, Jeff, go get a bucket of fried chicken. Uncle Ernie was pretty good about eating what he wanted at any time. It was, again, maybe not like a glass of Prosecco with your beautiful wife. It maybe wasn't like, you know, some artichokes in Rome or having your grandfather sit there. But even in a hospital room, a bucket of fried chicken is a very nourishing, important meal for everybody that's there. It's always important when you nourish the body and take something delicious, or maybe not so delicious in, that you really consider it and consider the people that you're sharing it with at all times. You always have to love those with whom you seal the deal. Thank you.